Imagine a hidden manuscript, buried beneath the sands of time, a book that was never meant to be found. Think of it, a sacred text, untouched for nearly 2,000 years, sealed away in the heart of the desert, a place where the whispers of eternity seem to echo through the stones. What if this lost gospel contained the words of Jesus himself, words that challenge everything we think we know about him, about life, the soul, and the divine? Today, we will journey into one of the greatest mysteries of all time, the secret book of Jesus found in the desert. This is not a tale of fiction. It is a story rooted in the sands of history, in the hidden corners of the Middle East, where archaeologists, mystics, and scholars have uncovered manuscripts that defy all understanding. Some call it the Gospel of the Desert. Others believe it to be a fragment of the Book of the Hidden Light. But all who have encountered its contents agree the words inside carry a power that transcends religion, reaching deep into the soul of humanity itself. Before we begin our exploration, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with those who seek truth beyond the boundaries of what is known. Because what you are about to hear may change the way you see the universe forever. In this journey, you will discover teachings that could reshape your understanding of reality, and the final revelation, the last secret, will be the most powerful of all. Let us begin our descent into mystery. It was in the mid-20th century, in a barren stretch of desert near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, that a group of Bedouin shepherds stumbled upon clay jars sealed with wax. Inside were scrolls, written in a language few could decipher, Coptic, the ancient tongue of the early Christians. Among those texts were gospels that spoke of hidden wisdom, teachings of Jesus that the Church never included in its canon. And yet scholars soon realized that these writings resonated with a depth and universality that could not be ignored. But the story we will uncover today speaks of a different discovery, one less known, hidden even from the headlines that followed the Nag Hammadi find. Deep in another part of the desert, near the ancient ruins of Qumran, a small group of researchers unearthed a text unlike any other. The parchment was fragile, its letters almost erased by time. Yet within its fading ink, they found words attributed to Yeshua, Jesus, words that seemed to merge the mystical traditions of the East with the divine revelation of the West. Who hid this book? Why was it buried so far from civilization? And what secrets does it contain that were considered too dangerous for the world to know? As we explore this mystery, remember that the desert has always been a place of revelation. Prophets, mystics, and wanderers have all gone into the wilderness to encounter the divine. Moses heard the voice of God in the desert. The Essenes, an ancient Jewish sect devoted to purity and light, lived in the desert awaiting the coming of the Messiah. And it was in the desert that Jesus himself retreated for 40 days, facing the silence and the shadows of his own soul. Could it be that this book was hidden by those same desert mystics, the ones who knew the true nature of Jesus' mission? Some scholars, such as Dr. Elaine Pagels of Princeton University, have long argued that the early teachings of Christianity were far more mystical than dogmatic. According to her research, found in works like the Gnostic Gospels, the earliest followers of Jesus believed that enlightenment came not from worshipping him as a distant figure, but from awakening the divine spark within themselves. The text found in the desert seems to echo this very idea. Fragments speak of a light within light, of a kingdom not in the sky nor in the earth, but within you. The words resonate with the essence of Hermetic philosophy, as above, so below, as within, so without. Could it be that Jesus, the man who spoke in parables, was revealing a cosmic truth about the unity of all existence, a truth later concealed to preserve the power of institutions? Think about it. If humanity were to awaken to the idea that divinity resides within each of us, what would that mean for the structures built around external authority? The discovery of this book might not only challenge religious orthodoxy, it could awaken a revolution of consciousness. But perhaps the most intriguing part of this mystery is the journey of those who found the book. According to unconfirmed reports, the team that unearthed it was instructed to deliver it directly to a private monastery before it could be examined publicly. Some say it was then taken to the Vatican archives, where it remains hidden to this day. Others claim a copy was made and smuggled into the hands of a secret society devoted to preserving the lost teachings of Christ. And so we must ask ourselves, what truths lie hidden beneath the sands of history? What wisdom has been silenced by time or by choice? In the next chapter of our journey, we will begin to unravel the contents of this mysterious book itself, the teachings it contains, the hidden parables it reveals, and the radical message that could transform how we understand God, the universe, and our place within it. The final revelation, the one we will uncover at the end of this journey, is the most powerful of all, one that might just illuminate the very nature of existence. Imagine for a moment that you are holding the manuscript itself, the ancient parchment, worn and brittle, its surface marked by time and mystery. The ink, though faded, still whispers through the centuries. As the first lines are read aloud, something extraordinary emerges, words unlike any you have ever heard from the familiar Gospels. They are filled with symbols, with cosmic imagery, with teachings that seem to bridge heaven and earth. The voice that speaks through them is gentle yet powerful, filled with the authority of one who knows rather than one who merely believes. It begins with a revelation. The kingdom of heaven is not a place above the stars, but a light within every heart that remembers its source. That single sentence changes everything. It suggests that the divine is not external, not distant, but alive within the human spirit itself. The Jesus who speaks here is not simply a prophet, but a master of consciousness, one who teaches that salvation is the awakening of divine awareness within. Many scholars, such as Bart D. Ham and Elaine Pagels, have noted that some early Christian texts were deliberately excluded from the canon because they presented a version of Jesus that empowered the individual rather than the institution. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, discovered among the Nag Hammadi texts, includes the line, "The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, you will realize that you are the sons of the living Father." The newly found Book of the Desert echoes this very wisdom, expanding upon it with profound clarity. In one passage, the manuscript describes Jesus speaking to his closest disciples in the twilight before his arrest. He tells them, "Do not seek the path in the heavens, for it is already beneath your feet. Do not seek the light in temples of stone, for it shines behind your eyes. The Father's kingdom is not to be built, it is to be remembered." These are words of remembrance, of awakening. They suggest that humanity's greatest task is not to find God, but to remember what it already is, a fragment of divine consciousness exploring itself through the experience of being human. But here lies the controversy. Such teachings, if made public, would have shaken the foundations of religious power. The Church in its early centuries sought unity through structure and authority. The mystics, however, spoke of liberation through knowledge, gnosis, the direct experience of the divine. It is said that this very conflict led to the suppression of countless writings deemed heretical. Could the secret book of Jesus have been one of them? The idea is not far-fetched. Historical records show that early councils, such as those in Nicaea and Carthage, were decisive in selecting which Gospels would define the faith. The rest were buried, burned, or condemned as dangerous. Yet throughout history, whispers of these forbidden teachings have persisted, carried by mystics, alchemists, and secret orders that sought to preserve the original light of wisdom that once shone in the deserts of Judea. As we continue exploring this secret book, its language grows increasingly esoteric. It speaks of 7 mirrors of the soul, 3 veils of perception, and the gate that leads from form to light. Some have interpreted these as symbolic stages of spiritual awakening, the same inner transformation described in mystical traditions from around the world. The parallels are striking. The Buddhist path to enlightenment, the Hermetic ascent through the spheres, and the Kabbalistic journey through the tree of life all reflect a similar vision of return, a return from illusion to truth. Could it be that Jesus, as portrayed in this hidden text, was not teaching a new religion but revealing a universal science of the soul, a map to self-realization that transcends culture and creed? Consider the implications of that. It would mean that the true message of Jesus was never meant to divide humanity, but to unite it, not under a church or a doctrine, but through the awakening of the divine spark in all beings. The text continues with another profound statement. "When you understand that I and the Father are one, you will also see that you and I are not two. For the breath that gives me life gives life to all. There is no separation except in the eyes that sleep." This passage alone could rewrite centuries of theology. It aligns with the mystical idea of non-duality, the realization that all existence is a manifestation of one eternal consciousness. Such an idea is found not only in Christian mysticism, but in Hindu Advaita Vedanta and Sufi philosophy. The Book of the Desert seems to bridge these paths, presenting a vision of unity that transcends all boundaries. But why would such a message be hidden? Why would those closest to Jesus, perhaps even his own followers, conceal this wisdom in the sands of the desert? Some historians suggest that a group of early disciples, possibly linked to the Essenes or to Gnostic communities, sought to preserve these teachings away from the reach of Roman and ecclesiastical power. The desert, vast and silent, became their sanctuary. And in that silence they buried their truth, not to hide it forever, but to protect it until the world was ready to hear it. And perhaps that time is now. Think about it. Humanity stands at a crossroads of spiritual hunger and technological power, searching for meaning in an age of noise. Could the re-emergence of this book be a call, not to return to old religions, but to rediscover the eternal truth that has always lived within? The next part of our journey will take us deeper into the heart of the text, into the passages that describe the cosmic creation, the divine energy that sustains all life, and the hidden words that could reveal the true nature of the soul. The greatest revelation is still to come, one that may challenge not only what we believe about Jesus, but what we believe about ourselves. The deeper one reads into the secret book of Jesus, the more it begins to feel less like a historical text and more like a mirror reflecting the soul itself. Each passage seems designed not merely to inform, but to transform. It speaks directly to the heart of the reader, calling forth a remembrance long forgotten. The further the scholars delved, the clearer it became that this was no ordinary gospel. It was a revelation intended not for the masses, but for those ready to awaken. The manuscript describes the universe not as a creation of separation, but as an emanation of divine consciousness, a living ocean of light in which every soul is a spark. In one of its most profound sections, Jesus is said to have declared to his followers, "Before the stars were lit, before time had begun, there was a silence, and in that silence was the Word. That Word was not spoken, it was remembered, for the Word is the light that knows itself through the eyes of all." These lines echo the mystical traditions of many faiths. In the Hermetic texts, the universe is born through the vibration of the divine mind. In Hindu philosophy, creation begins with the sacred sound Om, the resonance of cosmic awareness, and in the Gospel of John, it is written, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The Book of the Desert unites these streams of wisdom, revealing that creation itself is consciousness unfolding, an endless dance of divine awareness seeking to know itself through form. The text goes further, describing 7 great stages of awakening. The first, called the shadow of the world, represents the human condition, the illusion of separation, where man believes he is alone and abandoned by the divine. The second, the light of memory, marks the moment when the soul begins to sense that it comes from something greater. The third, the veil of fire, is the stage of purification, where the old self begins to dissolve in the flame of understanding. Through these metaphors, the book maps the soul's journey from ignorance to illumination, from man to Christ consciousness. The 5th and 6th stages speak of union and radiance, but the 7th, called the return to the silence, holds the greatest mystery of all. It suggests that beyond all light and sound, beyond even creation itself, there is an eternal stillness, the source from which all things arise and to which all things return. To find the Father, it says, one must go beyond even the light, into the silence that has no end. These teachings are breathtaking, but also deeply challenging. If true, they redefine everything humanity has been taught about God and existence. No longer is God a distant ruler above the heavens, but the very essence of life within all beings. No longer is salvation a reward for obedience, but the inevitable realization of unity. The implications of such wisdom are profound. Dr. Marvin Meyer, one of the foremost translators of early Christian texts, once said that these writings were meant not to build institutions, but to awaken the individual soul. This secret book seems to confirm his insight. Its purpose is not to create followers, but to create knowers, human beings who realize that the divine has been within them all along. In one passage, Jesus tells a disciple named Jude, When the blind man knows he was never blind, his eyes open to the world that was never hidden. So it is with those who awaken. They will laugh at the idea of death, for they will know that life cannot end. It only changes its garment. This teaching suggests immortality, not as eternal existence of the body, but as the awareness of life, as an unbroken continuum of consciousness. Death in this view is but a doorway, a passage from one dream of the divine to another. Could this be the real message Jesus intended for humanity, that the soul is not something to be saved, but something to be remembered? If so, it would explain why such a revelation had to be hidden. Humanity, for much of its history, has not been ready to accept that the divine dwells within. Power thrives on dependence. Religion, politics, and empire have long sought control through fear and separation, but a human being who realizes the divine within cannot be ruled. He becomes free, utterly and eternally free. It is said that the ancient keepers of this book were aware of this danger. They encoded its deepest truths in symbols, using metaphors only the initiated could understand. The 7 mirrors of the soul, for instance, are said to correspond to the 7 energy centers of the body, what Eastern mysticism calls chakras. The gate of fire refers to the awakening of the heart, where divine compassion dissolves illusion, and the path of light is none other than the journey of consciousness itself, the path of remembering one's true nature as divine. As one of the scroll's guardians reportedly wrote in the margins, "Hide the fire from those who fear its light until the world is ready to be born anew." Perhaps that time of readiness has arrived. The modern world stands at the edge of both enlightenment and destruction. Our technology grows faster than our wisdom. Our voices grow louder even as our hearts grow silent. Yet beneath all this noise there is a stirring, a quiet awakening in millions across the globe who feel there must be more to existence than the material, more to faith than belief, more to life than survival. The secret book of Jesus may be resurfacing now because humanity is once again listening. In the next part of our journey, we will unveil the final portion of the manuscript, the section believed to contain the most powerful revelation of all. A message said to have been written in the last days before Jesus vanished from sight. It is a teaching that, if understood, could alter not only how we see the divine, but how we understand reality itself. The final truth waits, one that promises not salvation from the world, but the awakening of the world itself. The final section of the secret book of Jesus is the most enigmatic and awe-inspiring of all. The handwriting grows smaller, as if written in haste or secrecy, but the words carry an unmistakable weight, a sense that what follows was meant to be read by those prepared to see beyond illusion. Scholars who have studied these lines describe them as a dialogue between heaven and the heart. It begins not with doctrine, but with a revelation. In the end, there is no end. What dies is the dream, not the dreamer. The Father and the Son are not two, but one awareness playing in many forms. And when the forms remember who they are, the game is complete. These words challenge everything the world has been taught. They reveal a Jesus who speaks not of sin and punishment, but of awakening and remembrance. He speaks not to convert, but to remind. The manuscript continues with imagery that feels both cosmic and intimate. The dance of light becoming matter, spirit weaving itself into flesh, and the eternal longing of creation to rediscover its source. Every star you see, it says, is a prayer of the infinite to remember itself, and every human heart is an answer to that prayer. This is the great mystery, that creation is not something separate from God, but God experiencing itself through creation. The universe, according to this lost gospel, is the living body of the divine, and humanity is its awareness, looking back upon itself. This echoes the mystics of every age. Meister Eckhart, who said, "The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me." Jalal ad-Din Rumi, who wrote, "You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop." The Book of the Desert carries this same truth across millennia, a truth too vast to be confined within dogma. But the revelation does not stop there. In its closing passages, Jesus speaks of what he calls the Great Remembering. He tells his followers that a time would come when humanity would forget its divine origin completely, wandering in the darkness of its own creation. Men will worship their reflections, the book says, and call it truth. They will fear the silence, and in doing so they will forget that the silence is God. Yet he also promises that in the far future, a new light would awaken, not from the heavens, but from within humanity itself. When the world grows weary of its own shadow, he says, then the children of the light will rise. They will remember the word that cannot be spoken, and the fire of heaven will return to the hearts of men. Some scholars have called this prophecy poetic. Others see it as a direct reference to a new stage in human evolution, not physical but spiritual. Perhaps this is what the mystics have always called the second coming, not the return of a man, but the awakening of Christ consciousness in all. Imagine that for a moment, the realization that the presence once embodied in a single person 2,000 years ago now begins to bloom in millions of hearts around the world. Could it be that this moment is happening right now? That the rediscovery of this ancient text is itself a sign, a reminder that the time of remembering has begun? The text ends with what appears to be a farewell, though it feels less like an ending than a beginning. The final words are faint, as if the ink was running out, yet their meaning burns with eternal clarity. The light that you seek is the light that seeks you. Walk as the sun walks, giving without asking, shining without fear. For I am in you and you are in me, and together we are the breath of the eternal. And then nothing more. The page breaks off, the parchment torn by time. But perhaps that is fitting, for the final revelation is not meant to be read. It is meant to be lived. Think about what this means. If these words are genuine, if they truly reflect the teachings of Jesus, then they are not calling us to a belief, but to an experience. They invite us to see ourselves not as sinners in need of saving, but as beings of light temporarily asleep within the dream of matter. Salvation, in this sense, is not escape from the world, but awakening within it. It is the discovery that heaven was never a place to reach. It was the awareness we lost when we forgot who we are. Across centuries, mystics have echoed this same truth. From the Gospel of Thomas to the writings of Jacob Boehme, from Sufi poetry to the Upanishads, the message resounds. The divine is not outside us, but within us, waiting to be remembered. The secret book of Jesus becomes then not a relic of history, but a living mirror, one that reflects back the eternal light hidden in every soul. So what are we to do with such a discovery? Will we let it become just another story lost in the desert, or will we allow its message to awaken something within us? The answer, perhaps, is the very purpose of the book's return. Because if these words found their way through centuries of sand and secrecy to reach you now, then maybe, just maybe, it is because you were meant to hear them. Think about it. What if the hidden book was never lost? What if it was waiting for hearts ready to receive it? This is not the end of the story. It is the continuation of a revelation that began long ago in the silence of a desert where one man spoke of a kingdom not built by hands, but remembered by hearts. That kingdom, the book reminds us, has never left. It lives within you now, waiting to be known. So take a deep breath, close your eyes and remember, you are not a seeker of light. You are light remembering itself, and as that light awakens, the desert within turns to garden, and the forgotten words of the Master are spoken again, not from parchment but from the living soul of humanity. This is the secret, this is the book, and this is the beginning. Thanks for looking.